In this video, I'll be replacing the chain slide on my Honda CRF250L. The chain slide is an important wear item that prevents the chain from rubbing against the swing arm. There's not a specific maintenance interval for the chain slide since it wears differently with different riding conditions. But a good rule of thumb would be to check it every time you lubricate your chain. You can check the wear level on your chain slide by looking at this indicator on the top side of the swing arm. When the chain has worn down to the level of this notch, it's time to replace it. I'll be replacing mine with this OEM chain slide from Honda, link in the description below. Here you can see what the wear indicator looks like on a new chain slide. The tools you need for this job are an 8mm socket and ratchet, 19 and 24mm wrenches, a Phillips screwdriver, and, depending on how long it is, a stubby Phillips for one of the screws on top of the swing arm. If you have it, a 24mm socket and torque wrench capable of 65 foot-pounds for torquing the rear axle nut. Finally, some rubber-safe lubricant to help get the alignment pins on the chain slide into the swing arm. Before getting started, lift the back tire off the ground by using either a motorcycle lift or setting it on something tall enough to rest the frame of the bike on. Now that it's lifted up, let's get started by removing the two 8mm bolts holding on the front sprocket cover, then the other two 8mm bolts holding on the chain guard, sliding it forward to remove it from the front tab. Now we can remove the 4 Phillips screws holding the chain slide in place. I was having a bit of trouble getting the inside top screw to break loose thanks to years of accumulated dirt, so I ended up using a pick to remove the dirt, then an impact driver to break it loose before removing it with a stubby screwdriver. Make sure you don't lose the washer underneath the screw. Then remove the other top screw at the rear of the slide, as well as its dish-shaped washer. Moving to the underside, there are 2 more Phillips screws in roughly the same positions as the top. Before we can remove the old chain slide, we're first going to have to move the chain out of the way. Use the 19mm wrench to hold the rear axle bolt while turning the axle nut with the 24mm wrench, then remove the nut and axle plate from the right side. Slide the axle bolt out while supporting the rear wheel. Take the chain off of the rear sprocket and remove the rear wheel. With the chain loose, there's enough room now to remove the old chain slide. Start by pulling it off the rubber retaining pins at the top and bottom of the slide. Don't worry if they break off. Then pull it however you can out from around the swing arm. As you can see, both of the retaining pins ended up breaking off on my old chain slide. The old rubber pins can easily be pushed down into the hollow swing arm. They're fine just to leave them sitting inside, but if you wanted to remove them, there is an access hole at the back of the swing arm. Also, you can see on the bottom of the slide, the chain had just worn through the rubber and was starting to make contact with the swing arm. Thankfully, it hadn't done more than just adding a mark on the pivot point. But going too long with a worn chain slide can cause major damage to the swing arm. Now is a perfect opportunity to clean up some of the accumulated chain grease underneath the chain slide. After getting everything cleaned up, it's time to work the new chain slide into position. I chose to slide mine in from the front, but it may be easier to slide it up and around the swing arm from the back. Once you get it into position, work the top retaining pin into place. It may be helpful to use a rubber-safe lubricant to help the pin slide in. After the top is in place, make sure that the front of the slide is seated in the alignment tab on the swing arm, then push the lower retaining pin into the swing arm. Now we can reinstall the Phillips screws and their washers, starting with the front screw, then the rear screw. Repeat on the other side screws and washers. To reinstall the rear wheel, make sure the rear wheel collars are in place and lift the chain on top of the rear sprocket. Guide the brake rotor in between the brake pads, then go back and finish placing the chain along the rear sprocket. Insert the rear axle, making sure that the single notch on the axle block is facing up towards the chain wear indicator before fully seating the axle. On the right side axle block, make sure the reference marks are facing down and forward to match the block on the left side, then reinstall the axle nut. Because we left the chain slack adjustments alone, simply sliding the axle forward against the adjusting bolt will put the slack back where it was before. If you need to adjust the chain slack, check out the card in the top corner for a link. If you have a torque wrench, the spec calls for 65 foot-pounds on the 24mm axle nut, holding the axle bolt with a 19mm wrench. Now all that's left is reinstalling the 2 8mm bolts to secure the front sprocket guard, hooking the chain guard on the front tab, and reinstalling the 2 8mm bolts in it. If you found this video helpful, click the like button and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Also, leave any comments or questions you have in the comment section below.